All right, welcome everyone to another episode of the Strive for Good Life podcast. I'm here with DK Ciccone, who is the owner of Movement Remedies, a Pilates studio in Boston. Welcome so much to the show, DK. It's great to have you here. I'm excited to have a conversation today.
Same here.
Okay, well, let's get started with kind of your background and what led you to eventually be an entrepreneur.
Yeah, so I had sort of a meandering background. I was one of those folks who never knew what she wanted to do. I started with a journalism degree, and then I ended up with a master's in international relations. For a long time, I worked in the health sector predominantly. So I worked in healthcare administration for some large insurers in the US. I also worked in public health, did some consulting with the World Health Organization. Kind of bounced around on some various organizations working on global health and governance. And that eventually led me into management consulting for Accenture. So, super rigorous schedule, very performance oriented way of working and team based. And I loved the work, but it was also very kind of grueling and taking its toll on me, especially the Monday through Thursday schedule for travel. And, I tried a corporate going back into corporate afterwards. And, essentially it was really a mental health thing and a physical health thing that led me to entrepreneurship. I would have never considered myself someone who was excited about entrepreneurship. As a matter of fact, when I first had my idea to open this studio that was for Pilates, but especially to work with the chronic pain population, I had one of my friends from consulting who had an MBA look at my plan, and she said, nothing about this screams to me that you're like really enthusiastic about being an entrepreneur. And I said, no, I mean, it's really not about that. I'm not, so I was kind of pursuing like, maybe I'm going to start a nonprofit. But, I did decide to take a step aside from my high pressure corporate career because I had a long history with chronic back pain from my young years. And it started to coincide with some pretty debilitating panic attacks. And I just, at some point you're in your mid 30s and you're just kind of like, this is breaking me. Why am I doing this? So it was almost like a entrepreneurship by necessity. At first, I became a teacher for another studio, but it was very clear that my kind of the population I wanted to work with was really not well represented in a fitness environment. Not to mention the fact that there's sort of a ceiling on what you can earn and how much you can control your life when you're in someone else's payroll. So that just kind of motivated me to try to find my own thing. And I have to say, if it wasn't for a really valuable business coaching program that I joined specifically for Pilates and other studio owners, I don't know that I would have had the gumption to actually go for it and go out on my own. But now that I'm in it, I have to say, I actually do really enjoy being an entrepreneur, and it's a lot different than I guess I thought it was going to be looking at it from the outside.
Yeah. Okay. So it literally grew out of a physical pain that you had.
Correct.
So you had back issues and had to fix that. Couldn't do the corporate job thing anymore. But the question in my mind is still, why actually venture into business when you could have just remained as an instructor, teaching Pilates, and a lot of people just do that their whole lives. So why did you make the transition to actually being an owner?
Yeah. I don't know how to say this without sounding like super woo-woo. But I do believe like there's this point at which you start to feel like an itch, like there's something that you wish existed in the world, and you kind of search for it. And at first, because again, I really had this passion for working with populations in pain. All the people who came to me for private sessions, and I've always, in terms of the breakdown of how I taught, maybe 70% of my teaching was working privately one-on-one. So for folks who don't really know a lot about Pilates, equipment and stuff. A lot of it is working one-on-one, and then maybe 30% of it was in large group classes. And I was always I was interested in the complex cases and the rehab cases because that was my passion. So I just kept working with these people who, joint replacements and neurological conditions and chronic diseases and autoimmune conditions. And it's like required a certain way of working that was just really not well suited in the fitness space, because the fitness space is so aesthetics driven, has like a little competition inherent in it. Teachers are supposed to be sort of like aspirationally, physiqued in order to, encourage everyone to come and get their abs, or a certain way or whatever. I think that most people, if they've heard of Pilates at all, that's sort of the like stereotype they have. And so at first I started hunting around for ways to be as an instructor inside a pain-oriented environment. And so I looked at working inside a physical therapy clinic, which is really common in some states, very difficult. In Massachusetts, doesn't really exist. I started looking at working with some of these folks who were physical therapy teachers, or physical therapists rather, and also dually trained in Pilates and had opened their own studios. And I just wasn't able to break this barrier, to be honest. But I'm like, this needs to exist. I know this needs to exist. I feel really passionately, especially when I work in the healthcare system, and having been through chronic pain and bounced around like a ping pong ball inside the healthcare system. I knew there was this gap between when a person gets discharged from physical therapy and when they feel fully themselves. There's like, they discharge you after insurance, and then they kind of leave you there. And a lot of people, maybe they can function to some degree, but they're still in pain, or they're not able to go for hikes like they used to, or whatever. There's like a gap. So I just kept trying to find this gap, that filling place, and it didn't exist. And so finally it was like, either you let go of this itch in your head that's telling you that this thing needs to exist, or you go make it yourself. And the funny thing about entrepreneurship is I feel like I was kind of hesitant. I'm very risk averse. I was hesitant at first. And once I got going, it was a lot easier to follow that pattern. I do think like once you get started, you can start to see things that don't exist, and then you try to create them. And like, you can see how it becomes a lot more manageable. But that first jump of trying to make something that you haven't seen, is really hard. So it really was just this, I don't know, calling, if you will, or burning desire to have a thing exist in the world. I almost felt dragged by it because, like I said, I can't wait to be my own boss. I mean, there is some allure to the fact that I can control my schedule, but I was afraid that I would be the kind of person who would be just sort of wedded to it 24 hours a day, and I wouldn't be able to walk away because I was a bit of a workaholic. So that wasn't exactly an allure to me. It was really just, this thing needs to exist. I want my life's legacy to matter. And for crying out loud, I've been chasing other people's definition of success, other people's definition of leadership, for years. And it never resulted in a sense of satisfaction. And so I thought, well, why don't I make it on my terms and see if this brings me the joy and fulfillment I'm looking for? And then after that, I don't know, open a cat shelter or something if that doesn't work out.
Okay, amazing. So you just saw that there was clearly a gap in the marketplace. No one else was filling it, and you felt like you had to step in and do it.
I knew that I needed to do it, and if it didn't exist, it had to be me to create it. Yes.
Yeah, I think a lot of entrepreneurs can relate to that calling, and I think the ones that are just looking for another product or service so they can make a quick buck, I think that's where a lot of people fail, because they don't have more to it than that. There's no, drive beyond just making money. So I think that's amazing, and I like highlighting those types of feelings and those reasons for why people get into it. So tell me about the group that you joined, because it seems like that was really pivotal in helping you make the transition. Was that before you even knew you were gonna, go out on your own, or where did that come into play for you, and what kind of things did it really help you with?
Yeah, absolutely. So I had applied or tried to, again, find other avenues for creating this fulfilling the needs of this population. And I had just gotten rejected from a job I really wanted inside a group that was physical therapy oriented. And I was also getting married around the same time. And so we were on our honeymoon in Belize. And I just said, we invested, like, especially because we delayed the wedding due to COVID. I said, we spent like every Sunday morning for the past, year and a half, 2 years working on stuff for the wedding. We did a lot of it ourselves. Like I painted the wedding invitations, and I made my own decorations and centerpieces. And
Wow.
I said, and we did all that effort, and it was for one single day. And also COVID did end up kind of screwing it up, but that's a whole other story for another time. But, and I was like, imagine if I had taken that time and invested it in something that was like self-fulfilling. Like, what could I have created that was enduring in that time? So I think first it was the realization, like, actually, I'm able to do this like side thing and get something going. And I know that I have this practice built up of a year and a half, so I could keep allocating that time. And so I said, what about me taking that time and trying to build my own place? And my husband, was very supportive and probably like, why are we talking about this on the honeymoon? But okay. And so as soon as we got back, I had been following this woman. Her name is Leslie Logan, and she runs a group called Profitable Pilates. So I have sort of been following her for ages, and I just happened to have an email land in my inbox that was promoting a kind of mini coaching week that she was offering for people to get a taste of her coaching program. And it was like the next week. And I'm like, this is what I needed. So, I joined that. It was a very affordable amount, and it was like a week long, and you had to kind of define your ideal client and kind of get clear about your messaging and, those kinds of tasks. And then I just decided to jump in with both feet and join this group. So the group is, like I said, is predominantly Pilates studio owners or Pilates folks who teach Pilates out of their homes. There are some other fitness folks. It offered me community. It offered me an opportunity to kind of reach out to this group at any time, especially because people are in multiple time zones, and say, oh my gosh, I got my first client. I think I need a contract. Like, where do I go? Like, how do I make a contract for my first client? Or I have a lease, and I don't know if I need to get general business insurance or this other kind of insurance. Those questions that come up, and you're like, where do I even start? It can be really overwhelming. So I think it really accelerated the process because I wasn't spending a lot of time chasing my tail trying to answer these questions. But also, there's accountability there because they make you do your monthly goals in Slack so everyone sees them. And so you're kind of saying, okay, this month I'm going to, start building my website, or I'm going to start a weekly newsletter, or I'm going to start talking to my clients, whatever it was. So that was January. By June, I had given my notice to the place I was teaching and, kind of ironed that out so we could leave on good terms. And then by June 16th, I had my LLC set up, and by August, I was seeing my first clients. So I think just being able to ask those questions, there's webinars every month. So on all the topics that you could think of, from how to tell an effective story to using social media to, branding to liability, like all the things that you would need to care about in our industry. So having access to the webinars, courses on demand, and also quarterly coaching, just really holds you to, I can do this, I can do this, I can do this. Because I don't know if it's just my nature or if all entrepreneurs feel this, but the biggest obstacle to my success in entrepreneurship is me. And that voice in my head that is constantly going, are you sure that's a good idea? You know what I mean? I wish I was one of those people that just jumps in with both feet without even thinking twice, but I've never been that way. So having a really strong community that just says, no, you can do this, and having people 2 steps ahead of you and also 2 steps behind you, it just kind of makes you feel like you're also helping this person with a thing you already figured out, but you're getting help from one other person who was a little ahead of you. It really made a tremendous difference. There's no way I would have gotten where I am now without it.
Yeah, that's incredibly valuable. and I can absolutely relate to being the one that is in my own way. And what's difficult for me is how do I express that, or how do I even communicate about this stuff with my wife, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, she's really supportive, but has no idea what I'm kind of trying to figure out. And so it absolutely is critical to be talking with and getting advice from, people that are actually doing the same thing that you're trying to do. And so I think that's awesome. Let's talk about, I don't know, maybe are there some specific example? I mean, you kind of mentioned the one, with needing a contract for a client.
Mm-hmm.
Are there some other big ones that kind of came up, that other challenges that they helped you overcome?
Yeah. So pricing is a huge one. I think figuring out how to price your services is really challenging. And it's really tempting to just sort of look at what your competitors are doing and just go, okay, I guess I'll go somewhere in the middle, or I'll do 10% off what everyone else is doing so that I can get the people who don't want to pay for that. I'll be the cheapest one. And so there's a lot of talk around pricing, and that was hugely helpful because, as women in general, we tend to undervalue ourselves and our services. Also, it's a service-oriented business, especially I'm in this chronic pain environment. And so it's really hard for me to figure out, like, how do I make sure folks who need what I have to offer can also access it, until the U.S. health insurance system has figured out to include Pilates as part of its offerings as an insurance. We're still outside of that environment. So we have, a lot of group calls where people are talking about their rates, making sure that you're raising your rates annually at a reasonable amount. I think that is a huge thing, because I didn't even know where to start, and it's really daunting. So they give us some rules of thumb in terms of, what they recommend for pricing different kinds of sessions. If I have a workshop or something and I'm not sure how to price that, I could reach out and chat with someone. The other thing that's cost related is actually, when I was first starting out, I was subletting, which was a way to, build up my client base without having a lot of overhead. I mean, one of the biggest, obstacles for us, or a business like mine, is the overhead. I mean, equipment behind me is not cheap, not to mention just the physical space rent in a city. So being able to rent by the hour from an existing Pilates studio meant that I could, start to build a brand and so on without having that overhead, and having to figure out, like, how do I manage that relationship? How do I price? What's a reasonable thing, to be asked to be paid for that? What do most people do with subletters? And so it was just helpful to have a gut check of, like, is this a good arrangement for me? What do I need to do to safeguard myself? What am I not thinking of? And then also, getting everyone's advice on scheduling tools. We also had a phenomenal webinar on, like 5 things you must do on your website kind of thing. And, it's really great because there's like a ton of stuff on the internet, but I really trust the kind of curated experts that they bring into the circle, where, everybody else is out there kind of trying to sell different things. And it's nice to not have to kind of shop around.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. A lot of the challenges you mentioned are things that every business owner in every industry experiences. So I think that's cool that you had a source, or, some curated place to go to help with that. We're just First Drive for Good Life. We're working on a mastermind right now. And so if you're listening, it might already be out. Check that out. But let's talk about, so that transition from subleasing to then getting your own space. I know there's some story behind that. So maybe you can touch on that, because that's a big transition for people.
Yeah, it didn't happen in the way that I thought it was going to, which is another thing I've learned about entrepreneurship, and has been also really interesting for me as a person. I don't know if you want to go there, but just having mental health issues. I mean, being a person that struggles with anxiety, I really told myself, I told myself a story about like entrepreneurship can never be for you. You're too weak. You're too sensitive. You won't have the what it takes, to kind of endure difficult situations. And one of the things that, I think folks who have anxiety can probably relate to is the feeling of being out of control is really hard. And what's really funny is just this idea like, oh, I'm going to become an entrepreneur and then I'm going to have control over my life. And actually you have control over nothing as an entrepreneur. Like things just, you take a step and then you just kind of wait to see where the pieces are going to fall. And then it's like never what you expected. So anyway, that's a long-winded intro. But so I had this sublet set up. I was paying the person hourly, and we started having some real conflict. So I really wanted to sign a contract between myself and this person that would really clearly lay out, like, these are the hours I'm going to be in the studio and these are the hours you're going to be in the studio. Because like my understanding was the reason this worked for them was because they weren't around in the afternoon and I mostly wanted to teach in the afternoon. So we had this kind of great arrangement. But this person did not want to be boxed in. So like refused to sign anything with me. And what was starting to happen is I would think I had the space to myself, and then they would kind of show up and be like, oh, I have a class at 3. I hope that's fine. And then, I'd be off teaching in the corner. Now, again, in a busy fitness studio environment, this is super normal. When I first started teaching Pilates, I would be teaching a 10-person reformer class. There'd be 3 instructors off in various corners teaching privates. It was like a ton of racket in there and the music is loud. Like that is a normal setup. But I knew what I was trying to build was a very safe space for people who had trauma alongside their injury most of the time. And so there's fear in the movement. There's tears sometimes when you're like something comes up from, a car accident or a bad surgery or a cancer diagnosis, or people just holding stress in their bodies and trying to process that. And so I was trying to build a thing that, again, was just not aligned with what this person's environment was. And they couldn't understand why I wasn't okay with this sudden ambush of people being in this space, super loud and not being kind of part of what I wanted. And then at the same time, I was pushing my business and trying to advertise. And basically it came to light that this person I live in a really small neighborhood, even though Boston's a big city. And this person was speaking negatively about me to people in the neighborhood about the fact that I was advertising and how dare I advertise. So it was causing me a great deal of angst. And again, this is where I might have stayed in that situation because it was safe and financially more prudent, but it was really just tearing me up inside. And I spoke to my coach about it, and she's just like, you have to get out of there. We have to figure out something. So I found a person who was willing to give me a room to rent in there. They had another business, but it was they had an extra room. And I'm like, okay, great. That's like a mid step. Now I'm paying something, but I'm paying something really reasonable. I ordered all my equipment because it takes 6 weeks to get it. Put down all the money. Everything is gravy. Go to sign a lease with this person, and they're like, I really want to kind of go month to month because I might need this space eventually. I'm like, well, I can't drop 10 grand on equipment and then not be able to keep it somewhere. So on the 11th hour, that person said, well, I think I don't want to go forward with this. So then I had my equipment showing up, and I didn't know what to do. So I reached out and called a friend of mine who was on the local city council, and I was like, do you know anybody, businesses? Can you reach out? Can you, ask around? I got, real estate brokers involved. And anyway, it was a whole thing. And then eventually I found the space that I'm in, which was way over the budget that I wanted to do, and a huge lease. But I saw the space and I was like, wow, this is perfect for me. And I loved the location. So again, I went to my community and I said, this is insane. I can't believe I'm considering this. But, the peace of mind that I feel like I'm going to have by being able to control the environment when I'm trying to do this really sensitive, important, inclusive thing, I feel like it's worth it. It was just kind of go, take the leap. Like, she always says, take messy action, like just take a step forward and figure it out later. And so I did it, and it'll be a year or 2 weeks that I've been in this space.
I love
So it was
that.
not the journey I expected, but here we are.
Well, and that's how it typically unrolls, right? Is you have to kind of step into the dark and trust that it will work out. And I love that piece about taking messy action. What does that mean to you, I guess? Is it just situations like this where is it just the not knowing and doing it anyway, or is there more to it?
Yeah, I don't know. I've never pressed her for what she means, but like to me, when I think about that, it's the fact that like I have these kind of risk averse and perfectionist tendencies. And so, for me, I would not take a leap until I was like super sure that I had all my risks mitigated. I knew exactly what to do. And taking messy action means it's like it's better to move than wait and kind of wait until it's a perfect situation, because it's just like never going to be a perfect situation. So when I find myself vacillating between acting on something and trusting, or kind of, holding back, I try to just say, you know what, it's better to move and have it be a little bit messy than to hold back this offering another 4 weeks until it's exactly what I think it needs to be. Because even when you think you have it figured out, it turns out you throw it out into the marketplace and oftentimes it needs to be changed anyway. So yeah, it's just keep moving forward, even if you don't have all the answers.
Yeah, that's key. The what you just said about how, even if you somehow in your head got everything perfect, the market will still tell you otherwise. So you might as well put it out there before you even get to that point, and use that feedback to then improve and iterate and go from there. So I think that's cool. Let's talk about, so now you're in your space. What are some of the other challenges? Like how have you grown from there? Because I'm sure filling the space, getting a bunch of clients in to actually be able to cover the lease. I mean, has that been a challenge, or, how did you grow from there?
Yeah, so it is still a challenge. I have a little bit of part-time work with a local consulting firm as a contractor. And so that allows me to have a little bit of financial fallback while I'm still continuing to grow the clientele. So that has been, a luxury for me, even though it kind of takes up some of my time. I have learned that there's a lot of ebb and flows in the business. And so there'll be times of the year where clients are really plenty and times when they aren't. So, learning to be comfortable with that, and then also to try to figure out, ways in which I can supplement that money. So maybe I bring someone in for a workshop and they're an outside speaker, and that, is like a special event. So I can bring in a little extra money on that month. I have a partnership coming up with a local business, which I'm hoping to expand. So I do this workshop with a woman who does EFT tapping, which is like a nervous system rebalancing activity. So I do some movement. She does that with some journaling. It's a really nice kind of release, and we call it release and restore, but it's a great nourishing team building activity. And so we're partnering with a local business to offer that in their space. And so like that's a thing I'm trying to expand. So I think just always looking for new streams, and knowing when it's the right time, because obviously I can't build my base clientele and then also be trying to like create add-ons. And I think I tried to go in with too many things at first. I had like an 8-week program, and I had privates, and I had classes, and I had all this stuff. And then I really pared back and said, okay, I'm just going to really hone in on getting my privates up and running and getting really good partnerships with local physical therapists. And so now that I have a base of regular clients that covers the rent, I can start to be more creative with, workshops, retreats, and like other things. And, I have a book coming out and, working on that as well as taking some time from the business. So I think just always being ready to be creative and take what comes at you, but to have also a little bit of safety net of some kind if you need it.
Yeah. Yeah. I've known plenty of business owners that have, as they've grown their business, have had to rely on a little bit of a side hustle or whatever it is. And there's no shame in that. So, I think it's awesome that you're making it work still, and that's helping you, be able to keep moving forward. I've thought a lot about just, the businesses with missions, right? And that's essentially what you are, right? You have this goal, this mission, whatever you want to call it, to help alleviate pain in the world, and that matters more on some level than having it all figured out right away, right? So if you're compelled to do that, and I think about that with Strive for Good Life and what I'm trying to do, I know that this is more important than having all the finances figured out right away, and so there is going to be that, I don't know, whatever you want to call it, that push to move forward regardless, and just make it work. And so if that means, for anyone listening out there, don't be ashamed of having to do something else and not having your business, provide everything you need right away, because, your mission matters and your business matters. So whatever it takes, just move forward. I just want to say that because, there is this stigma that if you don't have it sustaining you, that somehow you're less than, or whatever you want to say about that. So,
I mean, anybody who tells you they're making money right away off of their, business that they created on their own
right.
there's no way. Like you said, either they just, jumped on a product and trying to make a quick buck, or, they're full of it, or they have some like money stored away. I mean, that's just not how it works. And at the moment I'm in growth phase. So I'm taking a lot of what I'm earning and pouring it back into the business to try to grow. So, that's where, and I have the luxury to do that because I have, some other income. But it's just caused me to think about work differently, the work that I do in my consulting, is an enabler for a thing that gives me more joy and fulfillment. I could be having the worst day, and the minute a client comes in and I start working with them, it's just like a light just turns on. It's the most amazing feeling to just do this thing that it's like your heart is singing. Like, it's like, that it's for you and it's your purpose, and it's at every moment of it feels meaningful, as opposed to spending hours and hours and hours behind a computer being like, why am I doing this? Like, what is this for? Like, it's just, that to me is the entrepreneurship life, is being able to try to shape that and being true to that voice. And it never occurred to me that an entrepreneur could be service oriented. And you're 100% right. I mean, the other entrepreneurs that I've met who are really knocking it out of the park and have like staying power, they're often service oriented. And, I just pictured like, a slick haired, Silicon Valley type, like, I think we talked about that show, Silicon Valley, last time, and the guy who's, all about his 3 commas or whatever, and trying to get to $1 billion. I mean, that's what I thought an entrepreneur was. And it's not, actually. There's a lot of people out there who are pounding the pavement because of they're following their heart. And I just think there's something so incredibly beautiful about that, because you spend so many hours working. You spend, like, why do it according to someone else's rules? Why do it in a way where you feel that you have to show up as an inauthentic version of yourself? And I 100% believe that the main cause of my anxiety when it happened is because I felt pressured to try to be something that I wasn't in order to be successful in a corporate ladder type situation, especially for a Big 5 consulting firm or in a VP track position, which is where I was. And now I get to show up as me. And that's not only okay, that's actually an asset. And that is a gift. I mean, I could never go back.
You said that beautifully. That was exactly what I was trying to say. And then you did such a better job of it. Yeah.
You're very kind.
So, Well, let's talk about some of the other benefits because, I mean, obviously there is that amazing feeling that comes from being
Mm,
able to help people and follow your purpose. What are some other things that, has been great about being your own business?
yeah. So, and this is also, again, connected to one of the things I realized about when I was planning my wedding is because we did so much of it on our own, I really got to know a lot of local vendors, which is like not a thing I'd done before. I had local candle company to put in the gift baskets and a local bakery because I wanted Italian pastries at my wedding. And um, just we went to like the local nursery to get greenery because we were doing it at Christmas time. And it I just kept meeting all these people who had great stories to tell and were similarly like you think like, oh, okay, a candle maker. But like this lady she was doing it with her daughter and it was so obvious that they loved doing it together. And it made me just kind of really appreciative of the heart that small businesses bring to our communities and how they connect with the community and then they connect the community with each other, like you'll walk in and start if a person who owns a small business, a small shop, um, will often be like, where do you live? I mean, Evan, I do that. Where do you live nearby? And then someone will tell me, oh, I'm looking for a new job. And I'm like, what field are you in? And they tell me what field. And I'm like, oh, I know somebody in that field. And, same thing with other business owners here. Like we strive to connect other people in our community because a strong community makes us resilient. And so I think what I love about being an entrepreneur is being a part of that in my neighborhood where, I've been trying to get a women in business in the North End group going. And, I've been able to kind of meet some of the other women who own businesses around here and hear their stories and what they're excited about. And, we can connect with each other and help build each other's networks. And it just makes you feel part of the community in a way that, even as an introvert, I'm not like super social and out there, but I really appreciate the way that I feel like I'm part of where I live because I'm contributing to the economy in that way. And it really, you start to build networks of people who just really get what you're doing and and as you're older, it's like a little harder to build those friendship networks. Um, but even my bookkeeper the other day introduced me to someone who's starting up a networking organization for women with chronic conditions called Chronic Boss. I'm like, how cool is that? That is such an awesome idea. So you not only get to kind of feed your own fire, but you get to feed the fires of others, which is incredibly rewarding. And I get to know the folks who live nearby. I mean, it's especially for me, I guess, having a storefront. It's like a unique experience because I get to feel so connected to the businesses around me. Folks who are working at home might need to reach out a little bit more to feel connected. But I think it's very easy to feel isolated in this world and hide behind our computer screens. But I realize there's a lot of good old fashioned like neighborly love out there to be found when you're an entrepreneur.
I love that. I love that. It's so true. And that's exactly why I'm doing this show is because I get to talk to amazing people that are like-minded, that have similar goals and
Mm.
interests. And I love that connection. You said something about being an introvert. So I'm an introvert as well. What would you tell others that are introverts that are, starting businesses, growing businesses about putting themselves out there in the world and being able to connect with others in person? I mean, because that is a challenge for people.
Yeah, it is a challenge. Um, so a couple things. First of all, read the book Quiet. I believe her name is Susan Cain, author. Um, and I can get the exact link for you if you want to include that. But it is
Yeah,
awesome
of course.
about the power of introverts. It's a book that a friend of mine had me read while I was still in a corporate world. And, I always saw being an introvert as, kind of a hindrance, disadvantage. And there are some uniquely powerful things about being an introvert. I think we are often able to connect in a really authentic way, one-on-one, with folks. I think we're often, many of us, there's an overlap of being like an empath and being sort of able to sense other people's, moods and feelings and energies. And that is a great relationship tool. And I think um, the thing about putting yourself out there is that everybody has their own style and you don't need to model yourself. In fact, you're going to make yourself crazy if you try to model yourself after somebody else. And so, what I've learned is that the getting out there and like trying to talk to 100 people, going to like a massive networking event is just not where I'm going to shine in building my business. I do much better when I try to connect one-on-one. And so for me, my getting my name out there has been a lot of offering my services for free, having people come in and experience the Pilates session and then, kind of talk about it to others. So I have leaned on like that is my way. I try to connect in the way that is most authentic and natural to me. And you do have to stretch that muscle a little bit, of getting yourself out there and talking to people. But I would say, there's definitely room for doing it in that one-on-one relationship building way. And it's like, you may not make 50 contacts that are going to pass your information on, but maybe in that same month, you make 3 really meaningful connections that pass you on to 10 people each. You know what I mean? So it's, quality can lead to quantity in the long run has been my experience. And, obviously just making sure you take time to fill your cup when you need to have that space, that quiet time.
Yeah. What are ways in which you've done that? Do you just schedule it in, or do you have specific techniques to make sure that you're taking that time for yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it won't surprise you to hear that my number one way of filling my cup is to do Pilates.
Yeah.
um, but no, making sure that so first of all, what I try to do is like try to reach out once a day. I don't always do this, but I try to set a goal of making a connection with someone, at least one every single day. So sometimes that is, reaching out by email and offering someone a session or trying to get a call scheduled. Sometimes it's actually physically going and, handing my card information to a local company and seeing if they'd be willing to do something with me, whatever. So I think just like dosing it out is part of how I manage that, Like I said, I've tried to do a couple really large networking events and that just really, really burns me out. So unless it's, super duper aligned, like there's a local chronic pain group, like I go there and that's definitely so aligned to what I'm trying to do. It feels really worth the effort. But for me, it's just, it's meditation, it's quiet time, it's reading. I have the luxury or benefit, I guess, of being able to walk to my place of work. So that's about a 30-minute walk. And that is a real kind of time I try to make that, kind of centering time, both, centering on the way in so I can really be present for my clients, because even seeing clients can be very draining. I kind of take on a sponge a lot of their feelings. So I want to make sure I'm able to be present and connected to them. And then on my way home, I try to use that time to maybe listen to an audiobook or a meditation. I don't want to call people or, have more interaction. Like I let that 30 minutes be my quiet time at the end of the day so that when I see my family, I'm ready to give again.
Yeah, that's incredibly important. And a lot of people, they'll have drives right to their wherever they're working that So I'm in agreement. You need that quiet time, that space to center yourself and get ready. So I love that. You've mentioned a couple books. Are there other things, other tools? I know you have the group that is, kind of supports you in the Pilates venture. Are there other tools or mechanisms that you've used to develop yourself, develop your mindset, that we haven't talked about yet?
I really find a lot of benefit from just reading, business books constantly. And I didn't think that I would be that person, but what I've learned is that even though a lot of the books are saying the same thing, just like having that constant positive affirmation of like, you can do this, focus on your values. I mean, a lot of them are saying, the same thing, like, you're the only one who does what you do, focus on what you delivered, the results. And, you know, um, I think it's just really important to constantly have that positive influence pouring into you, especially if you're someone, like me who feels, um, kind of like you're your own worst enemy, and you waffle a lot about, can I do this? All the imposter syndrome. So, yeah, I'm just constantly devouring books. I really love Rachel Rogers' We Should All Be Millionaires, which is an awesome book and an inspiring story. Um, and she has also great tips in there, and I lean on that audiobook a lot when I need a little kick in the butt. Um, about making sure that I'm focused on the right things and growing my business. And then podcasts, obviously, I mean, there's tons of them out there. Um, and just keep continuing to pour into yourself. I think that's part of one of the things, I guess we were talking before about benefits. One of the things I love most about being an entrepreneur is that there's this need to continuously pour into yourself. And I don't know if you've ever done those Gallup Strength Finder surveys where they tell you what you're like, the order of your 38 strengths or whatever. And my top 5 were input, intellection, learner, connectedness, and positivity, I think. So 3 of those have to do with like gathering knowledge. And so those are just a huge part of how I feel fulfilled. And it's just really nice to be in a business aware or in a role where, my only job is to help pump myself up and help myself stay on the course of success, come up with creative ideas, continuously stretch my boundaries. I mean, it's really nice. I don't have to waste time learning how to do things that add value to someone else's pocket and someone else's, sense of accomplishment. It's really all about pouring into me, and how wonderful is that? It's like, I think of it as, like a lifelong grad program.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I look at entrepreneurship as the journey of self-development. It's the same thing. And so I love that you touched on that. I just realized that we're pushing up on time. I want to be respectful of what you've got going on today. So where can people go to connect with you?
Yeah, so best place or easiest place is my website, which is movementremedies.org, which is the name of my Pilates studio. I'm also on Instagram at movement_remedies. You can find me on Facebook, LinkedIn, and also on TikTok. But yeah, you can also just email me, dk@movementremedies.org. And I do have a book coming out for folks. If you know someone who is struggling to get active after having years of chronic pain, it's called You're Meant to Move, and you can find that at you'remeanttomove.com.
That's awesome. I'll definitely have those links in the show notes. So if you're listening, go there to find that and connect with DK. What's your final message to our audience? If you'd say one more thing that we haven't talked about, maybe.
If you are feeling unfulfilled in your current place of work and you're on the fence about being an entrepreneur, just jump. You can do it. If I can do it, you can do it. And what's the worst thing that happens? You just go back and get another crappy desk job. You can always do that. So I just think we need more people who are following their hearts in this world. So you're doing the world a service by being an entrepreneur, believe it or not.
I love that. That's absolutely the right way to look at it. And it's great advice, great reminder. For anyone listening out there, thanks so much for tuning in. Please subscribe on whatever platform you're hearing this on. and make sure to share this with everyone. That really helps us a lot. Thank you so much for being on the show, DK, and we'll see everyone in the next episode.
My pleasure. Thank you.